G'day. They call me Ned. I like to talk about old stuff, so this is Old Stuff with Ned, continuing with the autobiography of James Porter. Previously, James had shipped aboard the St. Juan, a Chilean brig, bound to Callao, the principal seaport of Peru. Part the second, in which James becomes a convict, is transported to Van Diemen's Land, and has an encounter with a native tribe. Page 7 continued. Our captain was a Swede named Frederick Simpson. As soon as we brought up, he went to Lima for a few days, when I found out the brig was on a contraband voyage, which did not suit me at that time, and on that account was determined to leave her. And before the captain returned, I took the jolly boat and went on shore, determined not to return. In the course of a couple of hours, the military were sent in pursuit of me, and found me in a grog shop. The chief mate, being with them, pointed me out. I, being rather elevated with aquadent, I would not go with them to the vessel. They drew their sabres by order of the chief mate. I then drew a slingshot out of my pocket, which was fastened to the end of a small line, to defend myself with. A regular engagement ensued. The chief mate drew one of his own country knives on me, he being a Frenchman. Finding I had no other alternative but to fight, or lose my life, for I was determined not to go back to the brig, I let drive my shot, and struck the mate at the back of the head, at the very moment he was attempting to stab me with his knife. He fell senseless at my feet. I have no doubt but I should have lost my life, had not two sailors have come to my assistance, and rushed upon the military. They played their part, and knocked down 2 soldiers out of the 3, when the other ran away. I received a slight wound in the head, and one of the sailors received a severe gash in the arm. However, we were compelled to make our escape as quick as possible, for we expected a reinforcement in pursuit of us. The 2 sailors made the best of their way on board of their respective ship, and I concealed myself in the bush, and in the evening returned by the seaside. I then returned, page 8, to the grog shop where the fray began, when I heard some soldiers carousing. I watched my opportunity and beckoned to a sailor. He came to me. I related the whole circumstance to him. He informed me the 2 sailors that assisted me were his shipmates belonging to the Mermaid bark, and they were to sail the next day for England. I asked him if they were in want of hands. He replied yes, and that it would be better for me to ship as quick as possible. That the man I struck with a shot did not expect to live, his skull being fractured, and it was 20 to 1, if they took me I should be shot for it. I was aware of this and took his advice. He called his shipmates out, 5 in number, and they consented to go on board with me. On our way back to the ship, I took them to a house where I left my clothing that I brought on shore. I went in for them, but they would not give them to me, saying I was the man that ran away from the brig. I insisted on having them. A dispute ensued, when the seamen came in, and we rushed into the apartment and compelled them to give them up against their will. We then made the best of our way on board ship, and I went down into the forecastle until the next morning, when Captain Kelly willingly shipped me, for I told him the truth and hid nothing of the proceedings from him. That morning, at 11 o'clock, bid farewell to the Half-Moon Battery with a stiff breeze in our favour. It was not until next day that I was stung with remorse at the idea of leaving my wife and child behind me. I knew they were provided for, and I cherished the hope that in a few months I should see them again, never to separate myself from them again. Buoyed up with this hope, I let nothing trouble me, not thinking, alas, I had taken my leave of them forever. Painful it was to me, and ever will be, the sad, sad reflection. Page 9, having brought all on myself by being too hasty. My mind will not allow me to comment upon this. After a stormy passage, I landed once more upon my native land, though not with that pleasure I had formerly done. I received my wages, and made the best of my way to my friends, whom I found all well and happy to receive me, it being then the latter part of the year 1821. I informed my friends I was married in South America, and that I had a son living, and that I should return very shortly, never to return unless I brought them with me. They did not say wrong I did, but requested me if I did go again to bring my wife and son with me and settle in England. I consented to their solicitation. I remained at home until 1822, and during this time I very often called to see my grandmother, who at this time was getting very feeble. I also had taken a trip or two to Gravesend, which proved my destruction. Two men that I formed an acquaintance with and myself were returning from Gravesend, observed a cutter at anchor and proposed to plunder her. I must own I gave my consent. We plundered her of a quantity of silks and arrived safe in London with it. I did not know what to do with my part, so they gave me what they thought proper, which was very trifling. One of my confederates gave some stolen property to a female who was detected with it, and immediately informed the magistrate the name of the person that gave it to her. He, of course, was apprehended that same day. The next day, myself and the other man was taken into custody. Neither of us could be sworn to direct as being the persons, but we were cast for death on strong circumstantial evidence. It was my determination not to let my friends know what had befallen me by my own seeking, but by some means they were acquainted with the whole circumstance. The shock nearly cost my mother her life, page 10, but of a strong constitution she recovered. Not so with my indulgent grandmother. The shock was more than she could bear, and before the news could reach her that I was reprieved, she died. My name, as I was given to understand by my friends, was the last words that escaped her lips. When I heard this sad news, my heart was ready to break, knowing I had been the chief cause of hastening her death. My sorrow was too acute to be repeated, and need only to say, in a very short time, I was sent to the wretched hulk at Woolwich, where the usage and my own remorse often caused me to contemplate suicide, and nothing but the hope of soon going to some other land could induce me to remain in that dreadful place. I was forwarded to Van Diemen's Land in the ship Asia, with 249 other unfortunates, and shortly after getting on board, we were favoured with a fine breeze, and in the course of a few days were out of sight of land. The captain released me out of irons, and I helped to work the ship, being allowed the same ration and grog as the seamen on board. Nothing of any consequence happened until we reached the Cape of Good Hope, where we were taken aback, with studding sail set low and aloft, in consequence of the man at the helm nodding. The quick command of the captain and activity of the crew soon put all to rights, and from that time everything went on well, and we arrived safe at Van Diemen's Land, and came to an anchor opposite the battery of Hobart Town after a voyage of 4 months and 5 days. We were detained in harbour a few days. We were then landed and sent to jail to wait until we were disposed of to our masters. However, I was fortunate to be selected by a master that lived in town, a great desire of all prisoners. I was ordered by my master to cut wood and bring water to the house from the creek every day. Page 11. I gave my master every satisfaction. His name was John Buller. I remained with him on or about 6 months, when he failed in, and became very much impoverished, so much so that the poor little children actually wanted food. The children I was very fond of, and I was determined to exert myself and find them food at any risk. My master nor mistress did not wish to turn me into government, though they could not find me in provisions, but allowed me on my own hands to do the best I could for myself. For this kindness I was determined to act with gratitude towards them, as far as was in my power. I then went and hired on board of vessels in the harbour, and received sometimes $2 and at other times $3. I took my money home regular, and supported the family for upwards of 6 weeks, until I found my master had given himself entirely to drunkenness and debauchery upon the money I used to give him, to support his family with, for which reason the next week I gave it to my master's wife. The next Saturday, when in a state of inebriety, he came home, cruelly treated his wife, and took every farthing from her. I did return home until Monday, when, to my astonishment, I found the unfortunate crying, and the children around her. After she informed me of the whole circumstance, I was vexed, and did not know what to do for the best, and while I was studying for the best, my master made his appearance. He was then a little the worse for liquor. He began to abuse his wife, as usual, and finding she had no money, struck her a violent blow, and knocked her down with the child in her arms. I stooped to pick the child up, and while in the act the brute kicked me in the face, which staggered me. This irritated me. Seeing the unfortunate woman bleeding, I seized the tongs and struck him a violent blow on the head, which brought him sprawling, page 12, at my feet. I, as a matter of course, was sent to the watch house, and the same day was taken before the Reverend Mr. Knopwood, who was the chief police magistrate. My master appeared against me, with his head bound with an handkerchief. He swore very hard against me, when his wife made her appearance, and entirely exonerated me of all her husband had sworn against me. The magistrate saw through the whole affair, and severely reprimanded my master for his base ingratitude towards me. I was then turned into the government's boat crew, and in a week afterwards I was made coxswain of the secretary's gig, and was as comfortable as I could expect in my situation. About 2 months had elapsed when orders came from the governor that a whaleboat was to be manned directly to take dispatches to Maria Island, as no larger vessel was to be procured, and at any time, in cases of emergency, a sailing vessel was uncertain. A whaleboat was manned. I was selected by Captain Welsh to take charge of the whaleboat, with strict orders, caution, how I crossed East Bay Neck, owing to the Stony Creek tribe, the most ferocious and daring blacks on the island. I was allowed to take firearms, cutlasses, etc., to protect ourselves. I had also a blunderbuss Captain Welsh gave me. He was superintendent of government vessels. We took our departure from Hobart Town early in the morning, and at dusk the same evening we made East Bay Neck. I could see the blacks' fires, and ordered the crew to land as quiet as possible, and we succeeded in hauling the boat 2/3 across before we were disturbed. The distance to haul a boat across is nearly a mile. A dog belonging to the blacks was hunting opossums, and set up a howl the moment he saw us, which alarmed the natives. They came to the spot, some with firebrands, and more with their implements of war. Page 13. I ordered the men to seize their firearms. The moment we got our firearms, they let drive a shower of spears at us at random. One of them struck the bowman in the thick part of the arm and caused a dismal wound. We immediately rushed upon them and fired our pistols at them, wounding some of them. They all fled. We then got to the boat and dragged her the remainder part of the way across the neck, but before we could launch her into the water, another shower of spears came amongst us. We were in such a hurry to get her launched that we did not know that any of us was injured, but I was soon informed that the bowman, the very same man that was wounded in the arm, was killed. A spear had went through his intestines, and he never spoke more. This left me a hand short, and now was the most difficult part of the passage. The channel, where I was compelled to tack the through, was overhung by a bluff point, where the blacks could stand and kill every man of us with spears and stones. I dare not near the surf that night, which compelled me to wait till morning. At daylight we pulled for the sea gate, when we seen a number of blacks waiting for us. They would have been able to wade to the boat and surrounded us, as it was low water. I asked the crew if they were willing to face the surf, as there was no other alternative either to do it or be cruelly tortured. They gave their consent. The whole of us stripped unto our trousers, as we had a heavy surf to encounter. All was ready, and immediately I took the east bit for it. Dreadful surf, but our only chance to escape. As we neared the surf, the blacks gave a dismal yell. I cheered the crew and entreated them to mind their duty. As we were among the surf, we shipped, as near as I could guess, about 100 gallons of water. We cleared our danger, and the evening of the same day run into Maria Island with a smart breeze. I then took the dispatches up to the Commandant Major Lord, page 14, took my dead boatmate to the hospital. I informed the Major what happened, and that I should require another hand, our firearms cleaned, and more powder, swan shot, and ball cartridge. I got what I wanted, buried the man, got my dispatches, and prepared to take our departure for Hobart Town, determined to give the blacks a warm reception if we were compelled to go the same passage back. We took our departure at daylight, but the wind blowing at southwest, I could not think of doubling Cape Pillar, so on the evening, with our oars muffled, shot her quietly through the sea gate. We experienced so much danger. We could see the fires of the blacks inshore. The darkness of the night sheltered us from their view, and in an hour after we entered the sea gate, we made the spot where we had to drag the boat across. It was silent as the grave. Not a ripple on the water. I ordered the crew to look to their firearms and see that all was ready at a moment's notice. We took a gill of grog each, for we were determined to pull the boat across as soon as possible. Otherwise, to have waited for the morning, we should have been surrounded with the blacks, and no doubt some of us, if not all, lose our lives. Everything being ready, we commenced our dangerous task. We had got the boat and end as near as possible, when about 200 yards we heard a distant shout. We proceeded about halfway across, when we observed their fires in our very track. I proposed keeping watch over the boat during the night, in hopes, if the savages did not already see us, that they would go off before morning. Our hopes were realised, for in the morning the blacks went off hunting and fishing. When we got a short distance of the place where we had to launch her, across the beach, we distinctly heard the barking of dogs. We lay in ambush for a little time, and presently up came a kangaroo, followed by 2 dogs, and shortly after 4 savages. They immediately came to the boat and began to plunder her of everything portable, when we rushed on them with our cutlasses and dispatched them, for to have let one escape, page 15, would have been sudden death to us. When we came towards the beach, we were astonished to see it almost covered with the savages, and our hope was to rush the boat all of a sudden through them to the water, and so quick was our movements that we got her 2/3 in the water before they recovered from their astonishment. We had great difficulty in getting our boat afloat, and it was not without firing at them we succeeded finally in getting away. They waded after us, and several of their spears stuck into our boat. We killed their chief, the last broadside we gave them. In a few hours after, made Elizabeth Island, and catching a smart wind from east-south-east, we stretched out for Hobart Town, which we reached in safety.